She was kind of a modest person to a degree, and she wouldn't want her body seen like that. And so the fact that somebody did this to her and made sure she was naked is yet another way to shame or humiliate Rebecca.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about that.
But she's trying to make it look like a suicide, and if being naked is kind of a red flag, then it doesn't really make a lot of sense if you murdered her to make it look like you're making it look like a suicide to strip her naked.
Mm-hmm. Well,
doesn't really make total sense.
Unless you're using it, unless it's out of like extreme anger and knowing that it would shame her even more to like be found naked, to expose her to the whole world.
True, but number one, she's dead, she can't care, and number two, you want to murder her, yes, but at the same time, another huge priority is not to get
but you're smearing her name.
I was going to say, so she doesn't care. I don't think that it comes in when there's like a revenge murder and you know what I mean? Like,
maybe not, but still,
honestly, it's like, okay, so like you're doing a revenge killing. That person that died doesn't care that person lives or not. Do you know what I mean?
No, I suppose that's true, yeah, but there's not a lot of rationale. I still think that
any of it.
Yeah.
No, there's no rationale in either of it.
Yeah.
None of it's rational.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's keep moving on.
Murdering people is not rational, kids.
Well, sometimes it is.
No, let's keep moving on. So we talked about earlier in the suicide theory the fact that there was some reenactments done.
Yeah.
So the TV station that did the reenactment, they actually did their homework, and they found out what kind of bed it was and where it was made, what its weight was, what they expected the weight of the mattress to be.
The tough part was actually finding the volunteer to put the rope around her neck and jump off the balcony.
Well, and not surprisingly, nobody actually volunteered for that part of the reenactment.
You get to be on TV.
Well, they found a punching bag who was happy to stand in. But the point is, they got a bed, they got a balcony. There was a house that was right nearby, so the circumstances were similar.
Was the pile on the rug the same?
No. Thank you for stealing that thunder.
Sorry.
No, okay, so here's the deal, is that this guy's house, everything seems the same, and the cops are like, well, you can't recreate exactly, so your recreation is flawed, and I don't disagree, because as Devin pointed out, there's a problem with the carpeting in that house. If you look at it, when they do this, when they take a 100-pound punching bag with 300 pounds of weight on the bed, and they roll it off the balcony, that bed moves 20 inches, which is 50 centimeters.
Yeah.
And they're
three times as far as our
3 times as far, yeah.
But there was carpeting on the floor?
Yes, there was carpeting on the floor.
It looks like commercial grade carpet.
It's a Berber carpet. It's a real. It's almost like the carpet we've got in this room right here.
So the crappiest.
It's
carpet.
very thin. It's very low pile. It's not going to resist it. And they kept upping the weight on the bed in an attempt to hold the bed steady, and they could never get it to stay anywhere near the numbers that were recorded in the Spreckles mansion as what they were doing. So
yeah, they really should have selected a different carpet to do their experiment on.
Yeah, I would say that's a big problem.
I would say it's a problem. I don't necessarily think it accounts for the bed moving like 3 times as much.
So if you think about it though, that leg is firmly embedded in the rug. You've picked up furniture after it's been sitting there for a year. Sometimes it's a pain to get it started, and so that's the resistance. So people are saying that combined with all of the extra weight, which we'll talk about the extra weight in a moment, they're saying that's why this is murder, because that bed should have moved so much farther based on this recreation.
I don't know, but also the bed didn't move. I think what happened is mostly the bed
Half
stayed.
of it moved.
The bed stayed, but basically the footboard, the right side of it,
popped forward.
As you're sitting on the bed, the right would be the right side, popped off the frame and came forward about 7.5 inches. That's my understanding.
I don't think the frame actually came apart. I think the bed twisted.
It turned from a rectangle into a parallelogram. Is that the kind of thing? Oh, okay.
Yeah,
that could be it.
Perfect. That's the word I wouldn't have been able to come up with. My math terms are not that good.
Yeah, I don't know. I still think,
Okay, well,
I think the difference is too big to totally count.
It is too big, and the original lawsuit against Nina, Dina, and Adam said, I just like saying it that way. said that the ladies were sitting on the bed while Adam tossed her over the railing.
That's the thing about these entitled rich women who just sit there like while he's doing all the heavy lifting. You know what I'm saying? I hate people like that.
Well, that's why it was important, I think, that they kept adding so much weight, and then we find out the ladies weren't there, so that kind of debunks that part of it. But there's some other things about Rebecca's body that raises questions. One of them is the tape residue, because there is tape residue found by the medical examiners on her leg, or on one of her legs, and I believe it was on the calf, on the back of a calf. Nobody knows where that tape residue came from. People have said, well, maybe she decided she was going to duct tape herself first and then decided against that. But if that's the case, where's the roll of duct tape and where's the tape that she decided to cast off and not use? So that doesn't hold up. I actually kind of wonder if, and somebody else has also, there's also been theories that, well, maybe she had a Band-Aid on for several days and the adhesive was left behind. But if that was the case, there was no wound noted underneath that. So that doesn't make sense.
You never know. I mean, sometimes I've actually put Band-Aids on my feet. Like if I got a new pair of shoes that haven't been broken in yet, I'll put a Band-Aid on the back of my heel to stop it from digging into the back of my foot.
Well, but this is on the back of her leg. But I actually wonder is that, she was an athlete, and it's not uncommon for people to tape themselves when they're exercising if you've pulled a muscle or you've hurt yourself so that you can't move too far and therefore re-injure yourself. And I almost wonder if she's done that. I mean, that stuff is huge these days, that the colored stretchy tape that people are putting on themselves all the time. I mean, you can just do that with basic medical tape. And maybe that's what it was. But this is a guess on my part. We have no idea where the whole tape thing comes from.
And it was on the back of her leg?
It was on her leg, and I believe it was on the back of her leg. I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it was on the back of her calf.
Okay.
And just one leg, though, right?
Yeah, just one of them. So
I don't know what to make of that.
I don't either.
It's possibly, most likely, entirely unrelated.
Probably is. Let's keep going in the murder theory. We're going to talk about the balcony that she went over. Apparently, the maid didn't do a very good job because the balcony was dirty. There was a layer of dirt all over it because footprints could be seen in the dirt. And it's a small balcony. It's only about, it looks to me to be about maybe 3 foot wide at the most.
I'd say more than that, more like 5 or 6 feet wide.
Okay, maybe I'm reacting to the photos because they get lined up.
It's a pretty dinky little balcony.
It's a small balcony, but what happened is photos were taken of the dirt because footprints were seen in the dirt. And there are several identified footprints. One happens to be Rebecca's, it's her left foot. Okay, so her left foot, the ball of her left foot and the heel are seen in one place, and then the ball is seen in another, but her right foot isn't ever seen in the dirt. There is a boot print in the dirt, which is very quickly identified as belonging to one of the officers who responded to the scene.
I don't know. I guess that doesn't make logical sense to me.
That there's only one foot?
Yeah, I mean, her feet, in that it would be clear enough to be, ball toe.
I think the very first one is the nearly a full foot. It's after that you start getting just the ball of the foot, as if she was hopping on the ball of her feet.
Okay.
Maybe that's trying to get as tall as she could get to lean over the fence and fall.
That may also be why on that one.
Okay.
But what
I'm just envisioning her trying to
hop along out there, pogo stick her way out there.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about that in a second here. Okay, so let's talk about this though. Well, actually, let's just talk about that. So people have said, well, where the hell is her right foot in the dirt? And I wonder if she because there is a little bit of slack in the rope between her legs. I mean, she can't get them apart, but it's not as if they are bound together and they're going to lose circulation in any time soon.
No, I think
it's possible that
a lot of space actually between the ankles.
Yeah, so it's possible that she could have. I mean, I don't know if you've ever done this, but if your legs are, have you ever done a potato sack race or things like that where you're in kind of a weird confined space. I've done it before, and I found that it sometimes was easier to basically have one point of contact, which was 1 foot. So you put the other foot on top so that your right foot is on top of your left foot. Maybe she was pogo sticking along that way. The other thing that I
think you might be the only human in this entire world who does that.
Maybe. Yeah. The other thing I will...
I don't think... No, I don't.
You're just mocking me.
No, I'm...
the only other thing that I will point out is that people are like, well, it would have been so hard for her to hop out there. Why didn't she fall down? Remember, she didn't necessarily have to have put her hand back through the loop of the knot behind her back until she got to the railing. So she could have, hopped out, leaned forward, grabbed the railing, hopped to the railing, cinched her hands behind her back, then gone forward. Okay, so this is in support of the suicide, but in support of the murder, people are saying, oh no, she was tied up and basically, kind of frog hopped out there before being shoved over. And the thing that cinches that for people is that supposedly there's a third set of footprints in the dirt that are very faint and hard to see.
So hard to see that the cops didn't see them, right?
That's right.
Yeah. Well, sorry. Just to go back to your theory that she was just hopping on the 1 foot, she had dirt on both feet.
She did. She did have dirt on both feet.
And
I'm just thinking that maybe that's why one made a noticeable impression and picked up enough and the other did. I don't know, Devin. I mean, this entire story has gone so kookyville on me because there's so many things that don't make sense that I don't know. I really have no idea.
Well, one of the imponderables about the footprints on the balcony is you don't know that it had a perfectly evenly distributed layer of dirt and dust across the balcony.
Right.
You don't really know that. I mean, they could have just been scattered here.
When you go to clean things, they are perfectly and evenly covered in dirt to make it as hard as possible to clean them. But when you're walking across them and you want to examine it later, that's when they're uneven. Dirt is like that.
Here's what I will say about the third set of prints, even before we go into it, is that we also don't know, how long that balcony had been dirty.
How many people had walked out there and all that stuff.
That's exactly right. Like I said, maybe the maid wasn't doing a good job, or maybe somebody else had walked out there at one point, because the impressions... Okay, there's a guy named Dr. Maurice Godwin. He's the one who found these third prints.
Yeah, I see.
He took the photos and he enhanced them, using air quotes here, to find those shoe prints or those footprints. Now, how he managed to get them to come out, I don't know, but it's entirely possible that the person who cleaned the balcony stepped out there and left a print, and that is what he is picking up. Maybe somebody walked out there. What's that?
What size were the prints? Do you know?
I think they were large enough to be. He pretty much conclusively thought that they were a man's shoe, right?
Yeah, I don't know that we have a size.
I was going to say I could have been Rebecca walking out there with her shoes on before she decided. I don't think it was. Off of.
I don't think it was Rebecca's because those. I don't think she had those because the shoes, the pattern on them, it's this. So it's a tread pattern that goes, from one side of the sole to the other, and it's a series of wide bands, like kind of arcs, and then there's narrow bands and then wide arcs again. It's that kind of sandal or flip-flop. You see this on flip-flops a lot. They have that. They're not meant for traction, but they give you a little bit.
Sure.
But it's entirely possible that somebody just walked out there weeks or maybe even months prior, and he just, in his enhancement process, managed to bring that forward. But he says that somebody else was there and helped kill her. Basically, he's insinuating that somebody was intentionally stepping in her footprints because they kind of seemed to follow behind her, at least in one spot.
See, the problem I have with this theory about that is that it would be the obvious assumption, if you're in this mansion that's owned by a stinking rich guy, that the help would keep that thing clean, the balcony there is. And that there wouldn't be a layer of dirt out there, so why would you be worried about footprints to begin with? I mean, I'd be more worried about footprints and evidence in the carpet in the room, which is much more likely to retain evidence.
I think the walking in her footprints is not so much saying that they were doing it to hide their footsteps. It's that they were behind her, marching her forward and holding her upright. In other words, she's not exactly compliant to what's about to happen. And so this person is holding her and, hops her forward, takes a step forward. It just coincidentally happens to land in the same spot. Yeah, I know. Anyway. I know. Okay, so we talked about the lawsuit and the fact that this is more stuff in the murder section, and that the combined weight, the two women on the bed, that's unsubstantiated now. We know that's not the truth.
That was the theory that they were sitting on the bed, and that's why it only moved 7.5 inches.
Correct.
Right?
So, clarify. How do we know that they weren't on the bed?
Well, because there is footage of them in other places that night.
Okay. You're saying that like I should know that, but you haven't said that yet, so.
Oh, I thought I said that we were talking about the bed earlier. That they're...
You just said we know that they weren't.
Well, we know that they weren't. The case was modified against Nina, Dina, and Adam, so that Nina and Dina are no longer being charged. Because footage was found that showed that other than Nina having been at the house and knocking on the door and getting no answer, neither of them were there. They were in other places. There is CCTV footage and stuff like that.
Cool.
Showing
you may have said that and I wasn't paying attention.
No, it's okay. It's all right. So we know that couldn't have happened, but now it seems the theory has modified a little bit, because they're saying that the damage that was done to Rebecca's head, that rendered her basically unconscious, because she wasn't drugged. There was no booze, there was no drugs in her alcohol, so to make her compliant to this whole scenario, she would have had to have been knocked in the head and basically unconscious.
Did you say there are no drugs in her alcohol?
Well, if I did,
I like it.
She didn't have drugs in her alcohol. She didn't have any alcohol in her drugs. She didn't have either of those in her system.
Great. I might have misheard you.
That's I probably said it wrong, because I am batting 1,000 tonight.
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah. But yeah, so they're saying that she was struck, and then whoever it was took her and shoved her over the balcony. Now again, it took like 30 minutes for the reenactment to tie her up, so that's a hell of a whack to the head to knock her out for that period of time.
What I don't really get is, if you knock her unconscious, why you need to tie her up anyway. She's unconscious. Just put a noose around her neck, and and especially since it would look less suspicious. Especially the hands tied behind the back.
Yeah, fewer red flags there.
Yeah.
It just looks like Okay, I'm not putting down suicide when I say this, but it's a run-of-the-mill, your standard, what you expect to see in a situation where someone has hung themselves. If the hands and feet aren't tied, the whole shirt and noose gag thing is not there. It's just a standard basic hanging.
Yeah.
Instead, she looks like she was lynched.
Yeah, maybe. She does.
Yeah, she does. It's just a question of who did it.
Yeah.
And also, it's a question of was she lynched? I mean, obviously too.
Yeah.
Even though it does look that way.
It does. Yeah. Okay. So the sole person left over in that lawsuit is Adam Shacknai. And Adam's got some things that are going not so well in his favor. There's the knots that were used to tie her up. There, you always see them referred to as nautical style, and then everybody says, "Oh, and by the way, he worked on a tugboat."
It was like he was a tugboat
captain or something.
Driver.
So he totally could have been the one that tied these knots. He knows how to tie those knots.
I gotta tell you, it's too bad I can't see that much. I've seen some pictures, some decent pictures of a few of the knots, but not all of them. And I got to tell you, I don't recognize any nautical knots in there.
I think other than the fact it's a cinch knot, there's nothing insanely...
I see very common, simple little knots. And in fact, and mostly no knots whatsoever. I mean, like when she tied the rope to the bed, she didn't actually tie it to the bed. It's got a loop.
She made a slip knot.
Oh, it's got a loop in the end. She passed the rope around the bedpost, and then pulled the rest of the rope through that loop. So it's not even technically a knot.
That's true.
Yeah, and she did the same thing with the piece that went around her neck. Same thing, she tied it in. So there was another one that looked like probably sort of a double half hitch possibly, which is, again, not a hard knot. It's not exactly you need to be a salty old sailor to tie a knot like that.
Yeah.
So I'm a little skeptical about the whole knot thing.
Yeah, I am not going to disagree with that.
Yeah.
Okay, well, aside from the knot thing, there's another thing that's going against Adam Shacknai, and that's porn.
Actually, I did want to say one other thing about the knots.
Sure.
Yeah. Sorry.
What's that?
Well, I did. Well, as you already know from what I said earlier, I hate that crappy plastic rope.
Right.
I really do.
Which is not easy to tie knots in.
No, and I think that if the guy truly was a tugboat captain, he would not have stooped tying the body. Seriously, I think he would have gotten himself a decent piece of rope. This rope is crap.
All right.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
And also, by the way, if whoever tied her up was indeed an artful knot tyer, then he wouldn't have tied her up the way he did.
Because, if this was somebody who was into bondage or something like that, they would have done something much more elaborate. I will agree with that.
Or much more simple. I mean, it's not really necessary. Well, if you're tying somebody, you have to pass the rope back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and back and forth between both arms to tie them up securely. And if the guy knows his ropes and his knots, he doesn't need to do that. Which is why I'm kind of doubting Adam as a suspect here for a murder.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, anyway, that's at least as far as the knots go.
Okay.
But I know there's some others.
You done with the knots?
I'm all done with the knots in the rope.
You all tied up with it? Okay. So the other thing that we got going on here is porn, because when police searched the computers in the guest house, they, they're thinking, okay, well, maybe like she looked up internet searches of how to tie a noose. Mm-hmm. Well, instead, what they find are search terms, and by the way, this is on both a computer and then eventually they look on his iPhone, but they find things like raped, sexy Asian girls, and bondage anime. And he, of course, initially he denies that, oh no, it wasn't me, but eventually he fesses up and says it was him. If you look at those search terms, and like there's this whole Asian bondage thing going on, you could see possibly how, if it was Adam, there's a weird sexual element to tying her up. Now, there was no intercourse, there was no penetrative sex, so...
That doesn't mean that she wasn't sexually assaulted, though.
That does not, but what I'm getting at is we know that they didn't go about it in the traditional manner, but if it's him and he tied her up and got his jollies off by seeing her all tied up, that's, this search string lights up all of those alarms.
Yes.
Okay.
I will, however, play devil's advocate for a second and say that it is entirely possible that he used some bad judgment that night and decided to go on the computer and look for some regular porn and kept clicking links which were starting new searches, which, it goes on, and suddenly he's in the world of gonzo porn. Mm-hmm. And this has happened to me, and I'm not talking about porn, you two pervs, so don't give me that look. We've done this. You're like, how to grow tomatoes in pots in your house, and the next thing you know, you're reading about llamas and can they turn cannibalistic, and you're like, how did I get from there to here? But okay, it happened.
I never read about llamas.
It's still like
when they eat you, you're gonna regret it.
It's still really.
It's damning.
It's like it skeeves me out a lot.
It's a little skeezy. I wouldn't say it's damning.
Not
enough to secure a conviction. I don't think.
I guess I can. Okay, the rape and the bondage, like the bondage, fine. Like that's a pretty normal vanilla kink as far as things go. But even the like Asian stuff, like she was Asian, mm-hmm. and it's totally possible that he just had a huge crush on her,
or that
she was just super attractive.
I've known white guys who really were into Asian girls.
Also, totally
not
possible.
Not unusual at all.
No, that's true. But the rape part.
Yeah.
What the.
Yeah. Yeah, no, there's a whole
what, dude?
You've read my stuff. There's a whole bunch of WTF spread all through this set of notes. So the last thing that I have on the It Was Murder section is something that we covered in the suicide section, and that is the DNA, or the lack of DNA. Like, if Adam were doing this because he was going to get back at her for hurting Max, then he must have got into a full-on chemical biohazard suit to have not, to have interacted with her for as long as he would have had to have, and yet left no fingerprints or no DNA behind.
Or gotten lucky. Well, because here's what I'll say about that is that he could have not done that because he knew he would be the one to find her and thought, I will be able to explain every bit of DNA of mine they find on her and the crime scene by saying, I saved her, I cut her down, I touched the rope, I went into the guest room, I did all these things.
He didn't go into the guest room as far as
well, but if they found DNA, he could have said, oh yeah, I must have run, he could have come up with an explanation given that he was basically living there, right, for the last 24 hours. So
he could have found some way to explain it.
I mean, it's possible that it just happened that there was no DNA, but that his plan was, if they do find DNA, I'm not going to, try to cover it up. I just know that I'm the one who will find her, so...
Well, and in support of that, if you watch his interview with the cops, he does a lot of, I don't know, man. I just know that this happened, and then I was over here doing that, and he swears like a tugboat captain through the whole thing.
Don't surprise me.
But, he does a whole bunch, I don't know, I just this, and then it was this, and so he could, in support of that, if he did get lucky, he could have said after the fact, like, hey, it's weird, we found your DNA in the tub, too. He'd be like, I don't know, I just ran up there, and
Or I took a shower up there last night.
Or I just, I was hanging out with her, and I had some DNA sort of happened, and
can I get that on a shirt? Some DNA just sort of happened.
Well, you're
DNA
in charge
happened.
of the shirts, so you could.
I can.
But even more than that, even if he did sexually assault her, right? He could have said it was mutual.
Yeah.
Right?
Which is,
But there was no sex, apparently, so...
Well, there was no vaginal penetrative sex.
Yeah,
that's true.
no vaginal penetrative sex, so there's no traditional, is the way I was framing it. Yeah. No traditional sex, found, but...
Yeah,
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. It's hard, because I don't think she was murdered. But I don't think she killed herself.
Well, it's such an extreme. Okay, so the way that she was bound and the series of things that appear to have happened, it is such an outlier, such an extreme way. It doesn't make sense.
Well, actually, in one respect, it could make sense.
How's that?
If you want to make it, if you want to commit suicide and make it look like somebody killed you, that's one reason to do it that way.
I don't know what possible reason she would have for that, though.
Well, let's give a hypothetical. I mean, let's say Jonah calls her up and says, it doesn't look like Max is going to make it, and I want you to pack your crap and get the hell out of my house. I want you to be gone when I get back tomorrow. And she's feeling all despairing because, let's face it, she found herself a pretty sweet little gig there.
She did.
She had herself a good thing going. And I'm not saying she was a gold digger, and I'm not even saying that this is what happened. This is just a hypothetical. So she decides to kill herself, but at the same time she's feeling a little bitter about the whole situation because she feels like it wasn't entirely her fault, if at all. And so she decides, well, I'm going to kill myself. That'll show him. And then she starts thinking, hey, why not, while I'm at it, really soil his nest a bit, because he's a big CEO for a company and everything, and I'll make it look like maybe somehow somebody possibly killed me. And I'll paint a weird message that makes utterly no sense. I'll strip naked, I'll tie myself up and hang myself, and make it look like he killed me.
But then why delete the voicemail?
Because the voicemail gave her good motive for suicide and for trying to frame him. Or she might have just done it out of sheer habit.
I haven't heard any stories that said that she was vindictive or manipulative in her behavior. I would expect that somebody that went to the length of what you're describing would have exhibited that kind of behavior in the past, and those stories would have surfaced.
Maybe, but here's the thing. In reading about this story, everybody ascribes all kinds of motives to the shack knives, which we really don't have any reason to actually believe. Everybody says, Max had this fatal accident. The whole family wanted to murder Rebecca because everybody was angry. Well, you don't actually know that anybody in the family blamed her at all. You don't know that. I mean, there's absolutely no evidence that anybody was even angry with her, much less murderously angry and ready to kill her.
Similarly, though, there's no evidence that says that she was angry enough at herself to have killed herself over it.
Well, I know.
You know what I mean? I think it goes both ways.
Well, no, that's exactly what I was just saying.
Yeah.
What I was saying is, you're saying, well, there's no evidence for that. I was saying similarly, there's no evidence.
I agree.
For the
that's why
knives.
I think
that's what I was saying.
It's where it's crazy, where it's like I don't think she was murdered, but I also don't think
I think suicide fits it
Suicide. Best. Although I guess there's a third theory here is
aliens?
That they were both murdered.
Yeah, no, that occurred to me too.
That somebody was trying to get to Jonah and murdered the kid and then murdered her.
Yeah.
Maybe she saw something, so they were like, well, okay, here we go. Got to kill you too because you're about to squeal.
Mixing drugs with the mob.
No, I think it was probably something like they do this to Max and then Jonah gets a phone call. Did you get the message? And Jonah says, yeah, screw you. Click. And, okay, well, kill the girlfriend. Okay.
I mean, it's not...
Yeah.
TV tells us that is a perfectly plausible
theory. It is
theory.
Just as crazy as everything else we've talked about.
It's true.
Yeah, no, I think suicide is really the